Now, the one person we haven't spoken about, other the extra band member, the seventh band member, is Shooter Jennings.
Yeah.
And there's some story about he wasn't your original choice as a producer, and he kind of came in at the last minute. Is that what happened?
Yeah. So we originally, every record I write it with a very specific place in mind to record it. I know that sounds weird. Like I wrote Things Change. I knew that I was going to make that record in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I knew we had every intent. We were doing it with John Fulbright. I knew that we were going to go to the church, which was Leon Russell's old studio there in Tulsa. We were going to make this record. And then we got to Tulsa and realized that the church had about 2 more months of renovations before it was going to be open. So we had to pivot. And Fulbright had a really great studio that just so happened to be owned by the Hanson brothers, that pop band from the late 90s. And so we did it, and they had this amazing state-of-the-art studio right beside Kane's Ballroom and in the Brady Arts District down in Tulsa. So we made that record. And one of the records before we did with Jason Isbell, and we went to Muscle Shoals, Alabama, where he's from, and cut a record in one of the most iconic music towns in the States.
Yep.
And so for this record, I knew that I wanted to make this record in Memphis, Tennessee. I knew that I wanted to make this record. This is a record about watching a country fall apart. And when it comes to musical legacy cities that are on the that fell apart in the 90s, Memphis is one of those towns. Memphis is one of those towns in the 50s and 60s and 70s. That was what anything you listened to was. It had some kind of root in Memphis. It was this.
Right.
It was this kind of intersection of everything.
Yep.
And I wanted to make a record in Memphis, so we signed on with a really hot producer in Memphis. We went through all of the steps, and then about 2-3 weeks before we were supposed to go in the studio, his management calls us and lets us know that they had a gut feeling that it was a bad fit. They didn't like the song. They didn't think the songs were, I guess, good enough. I never was given.
Do you think they were afraid of what you were singing about rather than the
quality
of the song?
I think they agreed with whatever it was. It was a lot of these songs I brought to the table as demos, and I tried to explain that, I got a 6-piece rock and roll band that's going to put some muscle on these songs. Like, you don't have to worry about them just being like 10 acoustic songs. But at the end of the day, if somebody doesn't have, if they don't believe in the songs as much as I do, I don't really want to work with them.
Right.
And so we punted. We broke ties, and here we are. We had the studio space rented, we had hotels booked, we had flights booked, and we scrapped it.
Man.
And so I spent probably 2 weeks as an artist trying, as an artist, when somebody you respect that you want to work with, that you sought out to work with, tells you that they don't believe in the songs, you start questioning the things you created. You start questioning the songs themselves.
Yeah.
And so there was I played him Me and Mine. I played him Better South. I played him Long Haul and Luckier You Get and Starts With You. I played him those songs on an acoustic guitar. And at the end of the day, you sit back and you start questioning, are these songs bad? Are they not good? Are they not good enough? If somebody who I really respect doesn't believe in them, like, maybe I should start over. And my agent called me, my booking agent. He called and said, hey, have you thought about working with Shooter Jennings? And at this point, Shooter's coming off of the Brandy Carlisle wins at the Grammys. Right. He's coming off the Tanya Tucker nominations, for which he would eventually go on to win more Grammys this past year.
Right.
And I was like, sure. I was like, Shooter's probably the hottest producer in the country right now, but I don't know him. I can't get in touch with him. He's like, well, I also am his booking agent. And I was like, cool. I was like, can you send him some demos? So the same demos that I sent to this other guy, I sent to Shooter, and Shooter messaged me about an hour later and said, hey, nice. I would love to make this record if we can make time. And so we carved out some time in early December of 19, and we flew to Los Angeles because I was like, I want to make it in Memphis. He's like, have you thought about making a Southern California record? And he's like, because I'm hearing a lot of Petty on these songs. Yeah. And Petty ain't from Memphis. He's like, how about we make like a Southern California record? Yeah. And so we went out, and it was a really great experience because I never really thought about making kind of a Laurel Canyon Southern California record. And then, we holed up in a place called Dave's Room, which actually was Tom Petty's engineer's studio he built. So the guy that engineered Wildflowers, here we are in his studio.
Nice.
And we made the Lucinda recorded there, Dylan recorded there. So it was like this kind of extremely vibey place. Like you could walk in and you could feel the magic. You were like, okay,
yeah,
this is going to be this is also going to be a cool place to make a record. And we sat down, and like I said, 10 days later, we made a record. And Shooter, we could not have made that record in Memphis. We could not have made that record with anyone else other than Shooter Jennings.
So what did he bring to the process?
But he believed in it as much as we did.
Right.
And again, like we were talking about band members, it's just as important, if not more important, for a producer to see the same things in your songs that you see in your songs. To take 3 chords on an acoustic guitar and some words and see a song like Me and Mine in your head. Like I told him straight up, I was like, I see this as being like this really quiet, almost like a rumination, like this folk song.
Yep.
And then I see it, just the anger and the despair exploding at the end of it. And he's like, oh man, I totally see that. Like, he's like, we're going to get like, it's going to be like a Pink Floyd noise jam at the end.
Yeah.
And then we did it, and we both looked at each other and were like, we both heard this in our heads.
It's fantastic.
And Shooter, again, was a 7th member in the studio. He brought such a positive energy. Sometimes when people bring up bad ideas, they immediately get dismissed as bad ideas.
Yeah.
And the danger of dismissing a bad idea is it might prevent someone from bringing a good idea to the table because they think that it might be another bad idea. So every single idea that my guys brought to the table, we at least tried it. Right. We at least went through the motions and tried to see if it would work. And if it didn't work, you could tell like it didn't work, and the person would be like, okay. But nobody got dejected. Nobody got down and out. Everyone, it was like this endless well of creativity for 10 days. It was like everybody was just throwing out ideas. And if they got rejected, great, let's pivot and do this. Let's do this. And Shooter really facilitated that. He was really great at bringing the best out of people. And I know that sounds cheesy and cliche for a music producer, but in my 8 records I've made, I've never had that. I've never had someone that was just endlessly optimistic about like, no, keep trying, keep shooting. Right. And he was excited. When you go into the control room and you're seeing your producer standing at the glass, like fist pumping along with the sing-alongs. Yeah. It's good. And it's not just some buddy of yours that went to Full Sail for 4 years and now has a studio. It's Shooter Jennings. Like he comes from decent stock.
That's true.
When your parents are 2 of the 4 original Outlaws, you get a voice in country music no matter what. You have the pedigree to do whatever you want to do. But that's the fun part about Shooter is he could have easily cashed in, just did the outlaw thing, and rode it off into the sunset. He could have, but instead, he is such an endless well of musical knowledge in every genre. And he brings that to the table. It's not just let's go in there with a train beat and a Telecaster and make a country record. Yeah. He's seen that before firsthand. He knows exactly how to do that. Yeah. And he can do it well. He learned from one of the greatest people ever to have a train beat and a Telecaster. But he pushes it. He's like, let's add like a Latin feel to this. Let's make these like if you listen to a song like Bright Leaf and Burley. Yep. We went into that song thinking it was going to be a straight traditional like bluegrass kind of thing. We're going to bring in mandolin and fiddle, and it was going to be kind of this Appalachian battle cry for the legalization of marijuana. Right. And he was like, how about we make it almost like a Latin Paul Simon kind of feel at the beginning that still drives the whole song, but then we add these atmospheric guitars over top of that acoustic bluegrass picking. And you're like, that's not going to work. That's 3 completely different styles of music. And then you listen to it and you're like, it's one of the standout tracks on the record. It's like, okay, that works. And we would have never seen that coming if it hadn't have been for somebody like Shooter, who's like, let's try the weirdest combinations of things just to see if it works.
Right. Because, I mean, the fact of the matter is it's a relatively new band at this point, coming in with a new producer. Things could have gone horribly wrong.
Things should have went horribly wrong. Like nobody, especially in my experience, with my experience. Nobody goes into that situation with a brand new band. You got to think 2 of those guys joined in June.
Right.
So they'd been in the band less than 6 months.
Man.
We were just getting to know like what you like to eat after a show. And we went into the studio, and literally it was, and I told him, I was like, I can't believe how fun this is. Because for those that are undoctrinated with studio time, it's extremely expensive, period. But when you're going into a studio in Southern California with a Grammy award-winning producer, it's extremely expensive.
Yeah.
And so when you're paying by the hour for all of these services, band, producer, engineer, catering, the studio time, it becomes overwhelming sometimes. You put this added pressure on yourself to like, okay, I'm an artist, I'm going to create, but I have to create under a clock. I have to create under a microscope.
Yeah.
And it puts a lot of pressure that sometimes it takes a day or two to forget, to forget the cameras are on, to fall back into that artistic zone. And that space didn't exist here. Like we went in, set up stuff, and immediately started creating art.
Right.
Which is unheard of, especially when you're doing it with some people who literally, by sheer definition, are strangers.
Right.
It was, I'd only met Shooter once before that. He was on tour with Guns N' Roses. That's the kind of music okay, let me just say that again. Like, that's how ridiculous I feel sometimes when I'm talking about Shooter, because I just said that so nonchalantly. And I had lunch with him when he was on tour with Guns N' Roses.
Right.
That was the only time I'd ever met him.
Right.
I drove down to Charlotte and had lunch with him, and we talked about the record. We talked about the demos just to see if we could vibe, and we totally did. And it's, you're going to a studio with somebody you had lunch with.
Yeah.
And you're like, I'm going to pay you some money, and we're going to try to create something special. It's hard to do, especially with strangers. Like I know bands that have been together 10 years that couldn't have went in and made that record we made.
Yeah. So the band must have come out of there. You said this was recorded in December.
Yeah.
So it's now July. We've been in a pandemic for God knows how long. You must not have had many shows to do after that. You guys must be itching to play.
We probably had 10 shows in January. Our last show together was January 30th.
Oh.
And then we took off. If I'd have known a pandemic was coming, I would have played every day of February.
Right.
But we took off because we wanted to give, the old supply and demand. If we don't play any shows until after the record comes out, people will not have seen us for 5 months, and we might be able to get some more people to come to the show, et cetera. The business side of being in the music business. And so we didn't play any. January 30th was the last time I got to sit down with my band. But that month of January, where we were playing the stuff from our old catalog plus the stuff from our new catalog, we were cooking. Yeah. There's an energy that's hard to describe when you're sitting on something special, and you're sitting on something special, and nobody else has any idea what you're sitting on.
Right.
Like we've known since December that these songs existed. We know since December that people were gonna attach to these songs pretty quickly. And so occasionally we'd throw one out in the live setting in January and just watch the crowd like, what was that? Like throwing a song like Me and Mine out to open a show when people think they're just going to get like, the hits. Yep. And you throw a 7.5 minute jam in, and they're like, 1, what was that? Yeah. 2, where can I get it? Yeah. 3, what do you mean it's not available until 6 months from now? We were cooking, man. We were cooking with gas, and we were so stoked to get back because we had the biggest tour we've ever had planned. We had almost 4 months in the States. We were coming down to Australia for the first time. We hadn't announced it yet. Right. We had a full European tour and a UK tour. We had in every sense of the word, we had a world tour planned. For the rest of the year. And here we are looking at spring and summer of 2021. Because us Americans, we're a very, very selfish breed of people. And, we think that global pandemics don't apply to us after 10 weeks, and that medicine and science don't know what they're talking about. Like it's nonsense. So I try to tell people, I'm like, the more you guys act like children who aren't getting their way in the supermarket, the longer that I'm not able to play these songs in front of people the way they're supposed to be played in front of. These songs are meant to be consumed on a nightly basis with 1,000 people in front of me and me feeding off of them feeding off of me. And it's just not going to happen until either there, realistically, vaccine is the only way we're going to get back to work anytime soon. And the minimum for that's 18 months. So you're talking, you're talking next summer. Before there's a possible, through trials and approval for a vaccine to actually be readily available. And until that happens, I'm not willing to put me or my family or my band's family or my fans' family at risk for shows.
So I got one more question for you. It could be the hardest one. You, as speaking as a Southerner, is there going, after this is over, if it's over relatively soon or whatever, is it going to be a better place? Is it going to be a better South or a better U.S.? What's your feeling?
I can already tell you, we've ripped down a lot of those Confederate monuments. We call them participation trophies down here. There's a lot of people in the South that have had those things up for a very long time. And for the folks down under to explain to you, the Civil War was the 1860s. It ended in 1865. So if you're going to honor your dead for a historical purposes, you would put those up in 1866, 1867, 1868. Those Confederate monuments were erected in the 50s in the South. They were not erected as historical markers. They were erected to intimidate and remind people of color that they were lesser than. That there was no historical purposes for these. It was all a ruse to scare people into staying in place. You got to think, late 50s, early 60s, we saw a rise in our black brothers and sisters standing up for themselves and standing up and saying, we're not taking this anymore. That was when the civil rights movement really got cooking. And those were erected in every downtown in small American cities in the South to remind people it's like, it could be worse. Remember. And so those things have lasted this long. And we're finally, like yesterday in Raleigh, they bulldozed it. They finally bulldozed protesters ripped a lot of it down. But we bulldozed it, and it's not there. It's not there anymore. And so there's a line in that song. It's down here, we're still fighting for all the wrong reasons. Old men still defend these monuments to treason. And that the one that I wrote that song about, the giant 70-foot monument in downtown Raleigh is not there anymore. So yes, amazing. I see some progress.
That's definitely progress.
I see thousands of people, black, white, men, women, marching on every small town in America saying that we are not going to stand for this anymore. We're not going to stand for this inequality. And I see change happening. I don't think it's going to be overnight. I don't think that in 2020 the election's going to happen and then all of a sudden sunshine and rainbows and pots of gold are going to pop out. And I don't think it's going to be a quick fix. But I think part of fixing a problem is at least admitting the problem exists. I'm not asking Southerners to be ashamed of their history. I'm asking for accountability for your history, acknowledgement of the real history. That's what so many people think. So many people think equality is giving up something, and so you have less. Equality is not about equality. You don't lose anything from giving someone else equality. You don't have to give up any of your pie for someone else to have pie. That's the hard part for folks to understand, is they think it's a more than, less than. And that's not what equality is. And so I think that you have a wave. What is it? Somebody posted a really great stat. It was, there's going to be almost 4 million people in the country right now who are 17 that will be 18 by November.
Nice.
That's a cool number to have. Because we're starting to see racism and hatred in this country is such an antiquated generational thing. And so obviously anybody that lived through segregation was taught racism at a very early age in the South. And you don't just unteach that without proper education and remorse. That's the kind of deep-rooted evil that stays with you. And then if it's not checked or fixed, it gets passed down to the next generation of kids, which would have been my generation. So you have, and it's how I was raised. I wasn't raised blatant racism,
Right.
but I was raised very much in a systematic racism.
Right.
It was very real.
Yep.
And so it takes leaving a small town. Somebody like me who is, I've been to 19 countries now, and I've played music for a living. I've been all over our country. I've seen every state, every city, every big city. I can't say I've been to every county or city in the States, but I've traveled a lot over the last 15 years, and it's made me a better person. Going off for a secondary education was also important. Going to a university, learning about other cultures, learning the fallacies of the stereotypes my parents taught me as a kid, learning that it's not true, that there's nothing wrong with black people, there's nothing wrong with gay people, there's nothing wrong with people that are different than you. It's just about opening up your ears, shutting your mouth, and trying to find that common ground. I feel like most kids who went and got secondary educations and have traveled at least a little bit are better people for it. I think that's an easy way to kill intolerance, is just travel a little bit. Mark Twain has a really great quote about it. It's important, and I think that we're starting to see, as the next generation of my family. I know that my daughter's never going to hear any of that stuff. I know that it ends with me. I know that exposure to a deep-rooted hate for other people based on how they look or how they feel ends with me. That's change. That's a better South. Knowing that my daughter's going to grow up and not have any of those, because like I said, I like to think that I've, over the course of 36 years now on this planet, I strive every day to be a better person tomorrow than I was today. And I still fall short of perfect every single day. But I think that ability to admit your wrongs, the ability to be willing to learn, is what's going to propel us forward. And I think that's what you're seeing a lot of in the South. You're seeing a lot of people raise their hand and say, we don't have it right, but I'm willing to hear how to make it right. I'm willing to change. I'm willing to speak up. I'm willing to facilitate the change that needs to happen. And you're still going to have people that stand up against it. And,
well, that's given.
And those numbers continue to drop. Those numbers continue to drop. And so the easiest answer for your question is yes, I'm already seeing a better South. This record's been out 2 months, and I already see things changing from that record already.
Fantastic.
And so it's a start. We're not going to fully, racism's not something that you can completely eradicate. It's so deep rooted and so clingy. It takes generations of cleansing for that to go away. Cultural cleansing. But we'll see. I feel good about where I'm at right now. I feel good about where the South's at. And I'm lucky. North Carolina is one of the more progressive Southern states. We always joke, we're not Alabama, we're not Mississippi. We're North Carolina. We're a relatively progressive. We're the only Southern state that voted for Obama in 2008.
There you go.
So I see these glimmers of hope. I see these glimmers of, okay, we're not there yet, but North Carolina is definitely on the track to prove that the South not just a bunch of ignorant hate mongers.
Right. Well, thank you very much that was fantastic talking to you. Thank you again for the record. I hope you guys hopefully you'll get on stage soon and get it out of your system, because it's got to be driving you nuts.
It's driving me insane. I can't wait to get back to it. But again, all in due time. It's about being smart, proactive, doing what we can to keep this thing down here in the States, even if nobody else is going to do it. Keeping me and my family safe until it passes by, until people wake up and realize that it's not just something that goes away if you ignore it. We'll see. Like I said, I love where I'm from, but you got to be able to call out the bad when you see it. And we're definitely not doing the right stuff right now. So,
well, thank you again, and have a nice day. It's like 10 o'clock in the morning there, right?
Yeah, it's almost 10. Yeah, so we're bright and early here. I'm sure you guys are winding down.
It's almost 2 in the morning here.
Oh wow! I did not even realize that it was that late. I apologize.
No reason to apologize. Believe me.
Yeah, I cooked breakfast. I went for a run. My morning's just getting started. So
Well, good on you. Have a good day.
heck yeah. Thanks for taking the time.
You too. Bye-bye.
We'll see you.